Well, bright and early good morning to everybody. It is Sunday. Is it? I don't know what date it is. The 24th.
May 24th.
I was going to say 24th, 25th. Coronavirus has really done this to me. We are streaming live in celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And my special spotlight today is Annie Guo Van Dan. Good morning, Annie.
Good morning, Priscilla.
So we did this early because Annie's a mom and the babies are still down, and this is the new reality. Like, get it done while the babies are sleeping, right?
Yes, this is my window.
Yes, the window of opportunity. So before we get started, I'm going to share your amazing bio with everybody. Now, Annie, we all know you. You are the darling of the Asian community, and you have done so much work. But for those people who don't know your bio, I'm just going to share more. You are the president of Asian Avenue Magazine, a Denver monthly publication that highlights Colorado's AAPI news, culture, food, people, and events. You and your mom founded the magazine in 2006, and it is still going strong. You are also the executive director of Colorado Asian Culture and Education Network, which is a 501c3 that supports educational opportunities for AAPI. And one of the events that we all love and look forward to is the recognition and awards of the Asian American Heroes of Colorado in the month of May, which is also in connection with the Asian Heritage Month. And that's always featured in Asian Avenue Magazine. And you also host a youth leadership conference, student exchange programs, and Asian Eats, a monthly event that brings the participants together over food to discuss issues affecting the community and supports local Asian restaurants. Love that. And also, as a side, we should always make sure we vote for best restaurant every year.
Yes.
Your background is in strategic communications, leadership, equity, and inclusion, and you are a change specialist for Change Matrix, where you manage projects to advance health equity in Colorado. And you previously worked at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, where you provided trainings about health equity and community engagement. And what a lot of people probably don't know is that you are a first-generation immigrant. You were born in Taipei, Taiwan, and you immigrated to Denver at the age of 2. And you grew up in DPS and graduated as valedictorian from JFK High School in 2004. And the one thing I'm really proud of you about as well is that you received the Asian Education Advisory Council Award, and you were also our keynote speaker. And you are a graduate of journalism from the University of Missouri. And you received your MBA from CU Denver. Go Lynx. Wow. Super mom, superwoman, young, vivacious, awake 8 days a week, 26 hours a day, moving and shaking. How do you do it all, Annie? How? Tell us.
I think before becoming a mom, there definitely felt like there was more time. And I was just so like wanting to give back to the community, even at a young age. So in high school, I just spent a lot of my time volunteering. That's when I got involved with heritage camps too. And so spent a lot of summers at camp, and it was just something like I've always been passionate about, working in community. And then now I'm able to kind of see how I can align that passion with the work that I'm doing. So kind of turning that passion into a career. I wanted to show you my virtual background.
Oh, yeah.
You see me?
I love it.
So funny. I'm going to turn it off soon. But I asked my husband, Danny, what my background should be. And he said, just make it the same as Priscilla's. So I actually screenshotted you.
Annie, you just made my day.
I thought you
that.
could maybe share what those drums are.
Oh, yes. Okay, so this is called the O book. All right, I'll kind of lift it up. So there are 5 drums called, and O means 5 in Korean, and book means drum, O book. And that
Mhm,
little drum on the corner there is called the jangu.
mhm.
And when you go to Korean performances, they are typically played together. And these drums are very common in the royal palace.
Oh,
So you'll see many times multiples, like 5 or more at one time. And these 2 right here kind of move in. So you're like boxed in. And
mm,
then you'll see it's dancing with rhythms. So
awesome.
thanks for asking.
Sure. I just want to share. Thank you for doing these spotlights. I've watched several of them, and so I just always notice the drums too. And so thought if opportunity for you to share as well.
This was the best place in the house because the Wi-Fi hits really well here and it doesn't skip.
Sure.
And then, like, I try to be professional, Annie. Like, I have a light too.
Oh wow.
Because I'm like, okay, this is like, people are going to be watching these videos in perpetuity, right? So I'm like, I got to like have the lighting. And
That's perfect. That looks
so now you know my secrets.
great. Yeah.
So, hey, valedictorian, that is amazing. Okay, so your your mom's working, your dad's working, you're immigrants from another country, you come to the US, you're like living this American dream, and then next thing you know, you're like valedictorian. That's some drive. Like I wasn't valedictorian, but I worked really hard. So I just want to know, what was your secret?
So I do think that it's interesting because I think I started actually at Trailer Elementary School, and I was in ECL that first year, so the English as a secondary language program. And I do think it's a common immigrant story as far as not having the language when you first move to the States, and really trying to adapt to the culture here. So I do attribute a lot of that to my parents. And you're right, they were working. We lived with our grandparents at home. So my siblings, my sister and brother, were able to speak our Chinese Mandarin language still. And that's largely because our grandparents lived with us. And they really kind of took care of us while our parents were at work. But, you know, my dad spent a lot of time with us doing homework and making sure that that was important. And I think a lot of our drive comes from wanting to kind of return our parents for the sacrifices that they made. So, in a lot of ways, the success of this next generation of Asian Americans is largely influenced because of the inspiration of our parents. We know that like the achievements we have is a reflection of them and something that they take great pride in. So for me personally, that was important to me. It was like I wanted to kind of pay back my parents by showing that the sacrifices they made weren't for nothing, and that they were to provide a better life for their kids.
So, did you grow up bilingual in your home? Did your mom make sure that you learned your language?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it depends on the family. You hear stories where some parents refuse to speak the language because they want their children to learn English really well because in their mind, it's how they will be successful in America. But it's really sad because most second generation Asians say, I wish my parents had spoken the language. And I think that would be my feedback to anybody who moves to the United States, to say your children can grow up bilingual and not lose their culture. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. So I think there is that spectrum. And I do wonder if my grandparents didn't live with us, if that would have been different for us, because it was almost like we were forced to use the Mandarin at home. And in Colorado, we're lucky to have some Chinese language schools. And very similarly, it was when I went to college that I went back and learned to, took Mandarin classes. Um, it's so true that when you're young, you don't really understand it either. You're like, oh, I don't want to go to Chinese school on top of school. But then later you really wish you had more of it. So for me, it's just, we can just speak it. We can't really read or write, like my siblings and I. So even for me, I wonder how can I pass that on to my kids. My husband's Vietnamese, and so already there's a disconnect in what we speak at home and trying to use all the languages. And so I agree with you, because over time, like, kids are going to get the English at school and they're going to pick up on the English very fast. You can see now, even when kids start going to school, they start responding to parents in English, so even if they were getting their language, from 0 to 4 or 5, at 4 or 5, they start using the English. So yeah, so agree with you on that.
So I would love to hear more about the journey you and your mom took to creating and starting Asian Avenue magazine. Can you take us back to that decision that you guys made?
Sure. So my mom was a journalist in Taiwan, and when she moved to the States, she, gave that up again with English being a language barrier. She ended up just working in retail, and then I decided to do journalism for college as my major. And when I was graduating, she was like, "I've had this idea. Do you want to kind of work with me on this?" And so that was in 2006. I was actually finishing my last year of school when we started. Our first issue, July 2006, we brought out to the Colorado Dragon Boat Festival. We didn't really know what we were doing at the time, of how we're going to market and get this out there. The main reason behind it was my mom was already really involved in the Asian community. And a lot of times when we had different Asian events and wanted the mainstream media to cover it, they often wouldn't, because it just wasn't something maybe like big enough to them, and at the time, like, cultural, like, diversity events just weren't as popular. So we just wanted to create a platform to recognize the community, the Asian Pacific Islander community, and the very exciting events and people in our community that weren't being featured in mainstream media. So
Wow, like you do a great job of reaching out to all different communities, because we know as Asians, we talk about this, we are not a monolith. So we're all very different. And I love the balance that you guys bring, because every time I look, it's the one magazine I look forward to reading every month, because the stories are so touching. They're real. Like, you spotlight everyday people, someone just got married, or
yes.
here's a great
Sure.
restaurant.
I was going to
And,
say, I do have some here. So
oh,
this is like
yeah.
our April issue. And when COVID hit, we had to be responsive to what was going on in the community. So yes, good point. A lot of the stories are just about what's going on in the families that live in Colorado. This one, as you touched on, the Asian American Heroes issue for May, we recognize the heroes in here that were recognized in 2020. But like you're saying, just what are families doing at home? We had some people share, a lot of people are baking right now. So the quarantine baking, and these are just, friends of Asian Avenue, like some of our readers that are willing to share their stories. And so we're always putting out on our social media, this is kind of the topic we're thinking about for next month. Can we get anyone to be interviewed? And we've, over time, these last 14 years, been able to kind of create more of a following. So it's easier to kind of connect out to the community. Versus when we first started, a lot of people still just didn't know about what the magazine was. So we've come a long way.
Yes, I've been, watching the journey, and the news is so happy. You have joy when you read the articles and you get to know people. And I think that is why it's lasted so long and is so relevant to so many people, because you open it up and you are connecting with the community. And in times when we're so busy and we don't really get a lot of time to sit down, I can pick up the magazine and read about somebody in the community that I've never met, and go, wow, like this is a special story that I can relate to. And so I'm excited to see how I know in businesses, you're constantly evolving and growing. And I know with COVID, it's forcing so many businesses to reevaluate business as usual. Are you thinking about making any changes to the magazine at all?
Mhm. Yeah. So luckily the magazine can be, I guess, versatile in that we can move a lot of it to online. So we were impacted because of the impact on the community. So the majority of our ads are restaurants and events. So now you have a lot of the restaurants shutting down and then the events have all been canceled. So when that happened, and it was very quick, like everything happened in the course of like 2 weeks, we had to really adjust a lot of what we were doing, what the content was going to be, collaborating with the restaurants to figure out, who was still open to doing the takeout to go. And so now a lot of the features around that, because you want to adapt to it. So originally, for example, June was going to be our travel issue, and it was going to be about like the best restaurants or the best airports in Asia. And so just trying to adapt, like, okay, that doesn't really make sense anymore. And what do the readers what would be helpful to the readers now? And also just how can we support the businesses? A lot of the point of the magazine too is to help our community thrive, and that includes there's a lot of Asian small business owners, and so now I'm just trying to figure out kind of how we can still highlight their businesses and give them support during these tough times.
So the magazine is free, and you sell ads. Is that the main way that
Mhm.
you create revenue?
Yep. So because it is free, we're depending on the ads. So that was hard for us too. So we've had to kind of cut down on the locations. Also because nobody is going out anymore to pick it up. So originally we were in 500 locations around the Denver metro area, and now we're really just in the supermarkets that are still open. And we've really cut down to almost just like 10 locations that we're putting the magazine in, and then pushing for more of the online, like getting all the content online and people can find it there.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw my interview yesterday. It was the Korean newspaper, and it was the
Oh.
same thing. Like, you're a business too, so everything is impacting the media as well. And so now
Mhm.
that things are starting to open up,
Mhm.
hopefully we can. I want to ask businesses if you're able, and even small businesses, like there. I know like there are Etsy owners. I'm an Etsy owner, and maybe we can buy ads to help get you guys back on your feet and getting more distribution over. It's like we need to help each other get our businesses back going. I'm really curious about your work in public health. So, what made you decide to go into the health field?
Oh gosh. So I have, as far as my education background, it was always in journalism and communications. And then my first job out of school was at an advertising agency. And I suddenly realized, like, oh, this isn't like that impact I wanted to make with community. So I was always working and then doing all this community work on the side. So um, my second job ended up being working for KHEP. It's the Colorado Alliance for Health Equity and Practice. It's a refugee and immigrant medical health clinic run by Dr. Alok Sarwal. And so the patients there are refugees and immigrants. So my foot in the door ended up being through my communications background. I was helping them with a lot of their marketing, and it just was much more meaningful. So every day we would see patients that spoke, over 30 different languages in Colorado. And that actually inspired me to go back to school. So my MBA at CU Denver is in health administration. So at the time I thought I could use the MBA and help the clinic and kind of understand more of the business aspects of it. But I was always passionate around the health, feeling like that was one of the direct ways you can help people. While I was actually in school, I had the opportunity to go to the public health department. So I started doing communications work there as well, and then shifted into a community engagement role. So a lot of what I was doing was health education out in the communities, and a lot around health equity and just how can we work on some of the disparities that exist in, for example, a lot of communities of color. And how we can provide more resources and support to kind of balance the fairness around health.
I know that's a big topic right now with COVID and how it's impacting, especially our uh, poor communities, and that language barrier. That's important to address so that everybody can be healthy. We want everybody to be healthy so that there's no more spreading of the virus. So you have two beautiful babies, and I remember reaching out to you, and you're steeped in your culture, and you said, I cannot go out for 30 days
Oh,
because it is our culture. Share more about your culture with children and that tradition.
oh, sure. So, my background, so I'm Chinese, and there is a practice that, after you give birth, that you are not supposed to leave the home for 30 days. And so part of that, I think is a lot of it is way back in the day, it was more traditional. One of the other things is you're not actually supposed to take a shower, at the beginning too. And actually, here in the States, people take showers like right away, like in the hospital even. So it was really interesting, kind of that balance. And talking to my mom, like, okay, which things should we practice and which we don't have to. Um, Chinese also make certain like soups and like herbal and chicken, different things you have to drink postpartum. And so it is that balance of like, okay, which things do we want to kind of keep in our culture, and which continue to make sense. So I do really respect the culture, and sometimes I am kind of sad thinking about how can we continue on when a lot of it, like, I'm even not really going to know as like a Chinese American. So some things now for me is even just like Googling, like, oh, how do I make this recipe, or how do I do certain things, and then how am I going to be able to continue to teach my daughters. So
When you told me that, I thought this is the most beautiful tradition. I'd never heard of that. And I thought, that's so amazing. And I thought it was so cool. But you and I being raised by Asian moms that are, directly from their country, it's a little bit of a joy luck club, I think, for us, and how our moms raise us so steeped in their culture. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that tradition sometimes, but I'm so grateful that my mom, and I'm sure you are too, has shared their traditions. And so, what are the names of your two babies?
so Cadence, and she's 2, and then Everly, and she's 6 months.
Was it difficult to come up with their names? What was that journey like for you?
So my husband is very creative. Both of their names actually have the initials of our parents. And so Cadence is the initials for our dad, and our initials, so Annie and Danny. And then Tringen and Nip are our parents' names. So she has the C, A, D, and N in her name. So we kind of looked at those initials to see what we can come up with. And then trying to find names that were still kind of, hip and Americanized too. Everly has our mom's names. So Vanessa, and then my mom, Utai. So that's kind of, so there was some meaning behind it. We put our surnames into their middle names. So Guo is actually my maiden name, and so Cadence is Cadence Guo, and then Everly's Everly Nguyen. Van Dan was actually, so my husband's last name is actually Nguyen. He's Vietnamese, but because it was such a common Vietnamese name, he switched we switched his middle to his last. So Van Dan now looks like an American last name, but it's actually Vang Dang. It's his Vietnamese name. That's his Vietnamese, like, first name, the name he grew up with. So we switched that because, one, Nguyen is hard to say, and everyone knows it's a Vietnamese last name. So for me, I actually wasn't sure if I was going to change to Nguyen, just not because I wouldn't take his last name, but just because I think everyone would have thought I was Vietnamese, and can I speak Vietnamese? And I was like, oh, I'll probably keep Guo. So we ended up switching to Van Dan to keep a name together, but we both kept our last names as our middle names, and then we gave them to our kids too. as their middle names.
That is, see, I am so glad I asked this question because that was the most fascinating story I've heard.
Yeah.
So are you okay with Van Dan, or would you prefer us to try to pronounce Van Ding?
Yeah, I can't even say it, so the Van Dan is just fine.
Okay, so if you had to choose between pho, banh mi sandwich, or the best burger in town, which would it be?
That's funny. I think it would be pho. Yeah, we love pho. So,
Do you eat more Vietnamese food in your home, or do you eat more Chinese food in your home?
it's probably more Chinese because my family is here in Denver. So the reason why we had moved to San Diego for a few years was because Danny's family was there. So when we were there, it was more Vietnamese food. Because a lot of like the family cooking, and in San Diego, there's a lot of Vietnamese like population and Vietnamese food. We lived in this area called Mira Mesa where there's a lot of Vietnamese food. Now that we're back in Colorado, it's a lot of what my parents are cooking, and so we get Chinese food a lot. So
I just had Chinese last night. I tried a new restaurant I hadn't been to in Thornton. I was up in Thornton yesterday and was driving home, and I'm like, I'm starving. And then I saw a Chinese restaurant, China Walk, I think it was called. And they made it fresh. They made my sesame like fresh. They didn't do the scoop thing. It was like a fresh chicken and broccoli. And I was like, yes.
yeah.
Really good.
Well, and some of the Asian restaurants here have been doing pretty well with the to go and carry out. So that's really good. Like the community's been very supportive as far as like ordering and making sure we can help restaurants get through these difficult times. And Chinese was always like a popular thing people enjoyed ordering. So a lot of the Chinese restaurants are actually doing pretty well during COVID.
That makes me happy to hear. So we're going to be getting a new edition for June. It won't be the travel edition. It won't be the airport edition. Although, or will it?
No. I mean,
Okay.
we will include some things about like what people can do for travel and like what other alternatives there are now. But a lot of it's going to be more around what's going on with COVID. So things that are impacting our communities. I know we've seen kind of just like the rise in some of the discrimination and racism going on. So we're going to share some of those stories and some of the trends that are going on nationally. Luckily in Colorado, there really haven't been that many reports. It's just, I mean, one of it is we don't know if people aren't reporting, but a lot of it are actually in the bigger metropolis. So the bigger cities are seeing a lot more incidents that are more violent.
Well, Annie, I could just talk to you all day long, but I know we are close to possibly your baby's waking up. So I'm going to give you a few minutes of free time. But my final question is, what is something that is bringing you joy and putting a smile on your face during this coronavirus?
So I know we've talked about them, but I think it really has been spending time with the kids. They, my oldest toddler, she's usually in daycare. So during this time, she's actually been able to be home with us. So that's been nice. I am juggling work and that family time. So sometimes it is stressful, but we're doing a lot more activities at home, and, we're painting with her. Like she's been painting rocks and learning her ABCs and just seeing her grow during this time. We also got potty training down.
Congratulations.
Yeah, there's been some accidents, but it seemed like the perfect window to do potty training during the quarantine because we're home with them. And then a lot of the cooking that I've been doing has been making baby food. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think a little different from like a parent's perspective of what's going on during quarantine, but just wanted to share some of that experience versus like, had this been 3 years ago when COVID happened, I think there would be a lot more different hobbies that I could be pursuing. But just really being grateful for that time. And I think a lot of people are saying like kind of slowing down and kind of soaking it in, the family time.
Well, Annie, I have thoroughly enjoyed catching up with you. You are so smart and beautiful and strong and a real humanitarian in our community. And so thank you for your time. And I'm looking forward to seeing you face to face.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this conversation too.
Okay.
Thanks,
Be
Priscilla.
well. Bye bye.
Bye.